So this is Jenna, ESP with Philosophy, and today I'm going to be talking about the two fundamental metaphysical aspects, existence and consciousness, and the debate of which is first, existence or consciousness. So on the one hand, you have the camp that says that existence is prior to consciousness, which we can call the primacy of existence. And on the other hand, you have the camp that says it's the primacy of consciousness over existence, or consciousness is prior to existence. So I'm going to assert that both are actually true. And while at first it seems like I'm violating the law of contradiction, lordy, I'm not, because I'm going to show how it's in different respects. So contradiction is, two opposing or contradictory things in the same respect and same way and whatever. And so the different respects is what we're going to be looking at, in which both the primacy of existence and the primacy of consciousness are true. And so what helps us to get flexible in our thinking in order to understand this, I will use an example from Aristotle's Metaphysics, in which he shows how the part in the whole can be posterior or prior, so that the part is prior to the whole in a certain context. In another context, the part is posterior to the whole, and posterior just means after. So prior, before, posterior, after. Prior and posterior are important metaphysical distinctions, as we will see. And so you have the letter, which is part of a syllable. The letter is prior to the syllable. But then on the other hand, you have the acute angle is posterior to the right angle, when it seems like the acute angle is part of the right angle. And that is because you need to know the definition of the right angle in order to understand the acute angle. So the different respect we have here is in the first example between letter and syllable, that's a metaphysical distinction. But in the second regard, between acute angle and right angle, that's a logical distinction, because you need to understand the logical definition one before the other. And we can also see this with grammar and logic, and people say that grammar is before logic, and metaphysically that's true. But you have to understand logic to understand grammar. So epistemologically and logically, it's kind of the reverse situation there. So first we are going to talk about the primacy of existence, and that primacy of existence is really important as the foundation for epistemology and for gaining knowledge, and that it asserts that existence exists. And so it's before consciousness. Consciousness is secondary, and then consciousness exists, and consciousness is the faculty that can perceive existence. So you can't have consciousness before existence, because consciousness has to be conscious of something. That something is an existent. And so existence must be first. And existence is what is. It's reality, it's absolute, it's independent from perception, and it's the use of our own moral and intellectual will and care for truth to align our perceptions with reality and with what is, with existence. And so that's the correct foundation. Otherwise, if you assert that consciousness is prior in this context, then you're creating a bad metaphysical foundation for yourself that will ultimately lead to solipsism, because you're saying that you're the arbiter of truth and that you get to make up reality. Reality is what you desire or think it is, and we know that to common sense that's not the case, and there's no such thing as a true solipsis. You'll have to contradict yourself just to survive. So we see this correct notion of the primacy of existence first as the foundation for metaphysics in the classical era, and then it came back in the 20th century with Ayn Rand's objectivism. And then we also see with modernity and the Enlightenment and then postmodernism, that was the primacy of consciousness. And things really got off on track. Then you have the linguistics in the 20th century claiming that, our language creates reality, So the trickiness here, though, is that there is an element of truth to that, and that's why we're going to move into the primacy of consciousness, because we do create reality to some extent. And this is in understanding the laws of manifestation, in that our actions create reality, and our actions are determined by our consciousness, our thoughts, and our feelings. And so we create the conditions of reality, which is part of existence, but we don't create the metaphysical aspect of existence, which is found in the laws of nature. It's found in nature and the laws of nature, which is causality and natural law. And so the consequences to our actions, we don't determine, and that's why it's important to gain the knowledge of that by starting off with the proper primacy of existence for epistemology. But now we're talking about the primacy of consciousness, so let's not get confused. So let's look at the way that our consciousness does create reality, and that is with our thoughts. Everything, all of man-made productions, the things that we create were first determined by our mind, and this is the law of mentalism in the Kabbalion. And so, unfortunately, with the control system, we're not really creating a beautiful planet. I mean, I consider nature so much more gorgeous. When I look at the buildings, they're like these gray boxes and very militaristic and like prison camp. And the reason is because we're actually manifesting the ideas of our controllers who are enslaved by their own consciousness. And so, because we do things for a paycheck, which is just the wrong reason to do things. But another way in which our mind is being controlled is through the ideologies that we've been indoctrinated with, such as statism and carnism, these religions of violence that are based on flawed metaphysics. And that's why we're manifesting a violent world. It stems from our consciousness. The world is a reflection of our consciousness. And so we can also see that our levels of consciousness determine reality, and our low-level, selfish, moral relativistic, egocentric consciousness that just cares about me and thinks I get to make up right and wrong is creating the existence of slavery. Because no, there is an objective difference between right and wrong, and we have to get aligned to doing what's right in order to evolve and flourish and prosper and be happy. And that's just the way that the universe works. It's metaphysical. We don't get to change that. But what we do get to change is our consciousness. And so we need to work on our consciousness to become aware of it and to integrate it, to purify and get rid of the evil, and to discard our own errors and false beliefs, and to unify our consciousness and become a whole individual. And so people that think that there's the primacy of existence, like they go too hardcore on that end, they won't see the causal factors for existence. They'll just see the effects, because the causal factors are in consciousness, consciousness creating reality. And so we can change our consciousness and therefore change reality, and we need to be empowered by that and determine the courage and will to do that. So in the biggest sense, we can say that the primacy of consciousness is true, law of mentalism, at the macrocosmic level, with the all and the absolute and the infinite living mind, which is talked about in the Kabbalion, and how the Creator creates creation. And so the absolute, doesn't multiply itself or divide itself or reproduce like we do in the physical manifest universe, but it creates the universe through mental creation. I mean, that's rationally the only way that creation could occur. So I thought that was interesting to mention. But I hope that, I'm going to wrap this up, and I hope that these distinctions between the primacy of existence and the primacy of consciousness is helpful. Primacy of existence is necessary in gaining knowledge and using reasons and having methodologies for truth, such as the trivium method. But the primacy of consciousness actually shows kind of a metaphysical framework for how we create the conditions, the man-made creations, how that is done, through consciousness. So we really have to integrate both of these truths to have a more holistic knowledge. So I'm going to sign out now, and I love you guys.